Welcome back to Doing Bart Things, and today we're going to take a look at a couple of things here. First item, just because I like talking about cases, is the Lian Li Landcool 216. I wanted to mention it because if someone came to me today and they just said, I want to build a gaming machine that's going to be relatively speaking high-end, I would probably, almost without even asking any sort of specific needs, like does it need to be a specific size? Are you looking for a certain style? Do you need anything? If someone just asked me like, hey, what's a good case? As a snap answer, I would probably say this case. It just does a lot of the things that it needs to do right. Lian Li has been making some great enclosures, and this one is no exception. As far as what I like about it, first off, right out of the box, and by the way, if you want to go and see a super in-depth review of computer cases, Gamers Nexus is really good. They do a really good job. There's another Overclock 3D, OC3D is another one who I just like when he reviews cases. I like listening to Tom. He's pretty cool. Maybe someday he'll actually watch my video. That would be crazy. But like, just an example of a couple places you could go and kind of get some case reviews that I like and refer to whenever I'm even thinking about making a purchase. Although I don't always completely go by their advice, I think usually you're getting some pretty sound advice if you listen to them. This case did extremely well in Gamers Nexus's testing. The reasons for that are, as far as cooling goes and being able to keep your system cool with fresh air from the outside, it's hard to beat this case. It has two 160 millimeter fans in the front. I'm just kind of waving my mouse over right here to let you see. Yeah, just click on this. And these things move a ton of air. They basically pull in air and just eject it throughout the case. And it's mesh in the front. You can get a filter for the front separately if you want to. The steel mesh does pretty well with keeping debris out. That's one of the issues I'm having in my house right now is I've got animals and dust, and I've built systems in a couple of different Lian Li cases recently. I've built a system in a 011 Air Mini, a Landcool 3 in the past year for sure, and I would say both of them were decent to build in. The Landcool 3 was awesome to build in. It's a big case. All the doors are hinged. You know, it definitely is interesting, but it's also much more expensive than this case. You got to pay another $50 or so to get your hands on it. And it doesn't have these crazy 160 millimeter fans, which I think are awesome for airflow. It does have some more water cooling, or it does have some different water cooling support. You can get a 420 millimeter rad in it for the biggest AIOs that are on the market right now, but this case still fits a 360 millimeter on the top, and you can do that and continue to use these crazy fans, which is awesome. You can also put a couple of fans on the PSU shroud, as you see there, which will then pull air through the mesh on the side panel and cool down your graphics card. You can mount a graphics card sideways in this case. It's got room to do that. It's not that big though. It doesn't like, just completely dominate your desk like the old full tires used to. Another thing I really like is on the top of this case, there is a removable, the entire thing is removable. Number one, I guess I should point out. But number two, if you look at the actual bracket, the bracket itself, it's got a panel that you can install that will block air from coming back in the case. So if you have a 240 mil radiator or a 280 mil radiator, I believe a 280 mil will still fit with this, I think. basically it will not recirculate air back into the case. And this is a feature I really wish more case manufacturers would use, or even just think about and put, some thought about it into their cases. Obviously, there's a cost associated with adding, extra features and stuff. But I mean, this is a $110 case, and they have absolutely just jam-packed it with stuff, with features, which is awesome. And this isn't bad. Like, this would definitely can help, because when you're blowing air out the top, if you have an opening like that, and kind of create a situation where maybe the air might kind of recirculate and you get a little bit of hot air back in, and this can help keep that from happening. And I think that that's just a really cool little attention to detail that Lian Li is starting to just, again, they've really, I think this enclosure knocks it out of the park. If this was available when I bought my Lian Cool 2, I would have definitely had one of these, for sure. And the Lian Cool 2 is not a bad case. I think for myself, though, like, I'm looking for something smaller. If Lian Li made one of these that was a micro ATX case, and maybe they did some space savings by, I don't know, shrinking the front fans down to 140s, just some really good 140s that look like these, or maybe included just one of these, I could see that being really effective, because these fans are very stout, like they move some air. I think they are, in fact, 30 mil fans thick, 30 millimeter, 38 millimeter, something like that. Not sure. But I think in a micro ATX or mini ITX situation, just one of these would be enough to blow air right through the system, which would be pretty cool. Something else this case has, you can change the front I/O from the top down to the side, which is massive. Like, I love that so much. Fumbling around with USB ports and power buttons and reset buttons on the top of the case when you can't see it, because you're sitting at your desk, right, and you can't see, so you have to put your hand up there. If you could see that on the bottom side, like, that would be a good option to have. Not everybody puts their case underneath their desk where they can use it on the top. And over the years, that has grown a little bit more irritating for me, that there's not any ability to have the I/O in the front. So that alone is, again, another really cool attention to detail that they did. You can even buy an extra panel that has some extra USB ports and stuff in it for an internal header if you buy it separately. So they didn't even just think about this case as it comes being really good, but they also thought about accessories. And speaking of as it comes, the big deal about this case is, if you buy it, you chuck your hardware in there, and you're good to go. Like, these two fans and then that one rear fan, it comes with those, and it will absolutely cool anything, basically. And that's great. There's a lot of cases out there right now. There's cases that are more expensive than this one, as a matter of fact, that don't do that job very well. Off the top of my head, I can think of the ASUS GT502. Awesome looking case, really well built. I've built a system in that case. Cool case, right? But it comes with no fans. So I don't think it comes with any fans. I don't even think there's an exhaust fan. So if you want to use it, you have to install and buy your own fans, which adds cost. And you have to decide what fans, and you have to decide where to put them. This is ready to go. Like, you just throw your cooler in there. If you have an air cooler, that's fine. If you have a AIO, throw it up on the roof, and off you go. And you're going to have great thermals. Obviously, great thermals if you orientate your cooler the right way. Obviously, you don't want your cooler fighting with these fans blowing in. I don't think would probably not be the key to your success. So you want to make sure that they're blowing towards the back. But other than that, I mean, you're good. Like, this thing is going to be awesome. So I really like this case. I've been tempted to buy one. It's just, I'm thinking I kind of want to make my rig smaller, but I really hope that Lian Li maybe figures something out here with making more versions of cases that use these fans. I would be interested in seeing that. And I would be interested if they would sell these fans separately. I think that would be awesome too. Just looking at them, I suspect these would fit on any mount for a 180 millimeter fan, maybe 200 millimeter. So I'd be curious to see how that works. But this is a well done case by Lian Li. So if anybody's looking for a mid-tower, this should, in my humble opinion, this kind of should be for now your default choice. And I love fractal design cases. Corsair really has some decent cases as well. Well, they've got a few. I would say your 4000D and your 5000D Air, like the mesh ones, are pretty good cases. Fractal Design has the Torrent series out right now, which is really good. They've been making defined cases, and their top series is really affordable. But just features to money, man, I think this case, this one wins, at least in my eyes. So if someone came and asked me, I would say get this one. Okay, next thing. All right. Not going to spend too much time on this because I've already ranted on how expensive video cards are. But this thing, so this is the ASUS GeForce RTX 4080, and that's the key here, 4080 Noctua Edition. Very cool. Like, I do like the cooler, honestly, and I like the Noctua design. I could see a build where that would work when you're using all the Noctua fans and whatnot. Problem with this is, first off, it's a 4080, so you know the price is going to be at least $11.99 for a 4080, and I already have made it abundantly apparent that I do not like the pricing of the 4080. I think it's really overpriced for what it is. Well, this card, because of its specialized cooler and these Noctua fans and everything, it's well north of that. It is $1,650, and at that price, there's no way I could recommend this card at all, even though it's cool. I wouldn't recommend it honestly at $1,200 because of 4080. You know, you can't. I mean, no matter what you do to it, you could make it you could put a water block on it and water cool it. It's still a 4080. And as cool as this is, unless you're going for a theme build and you've got a lot of money to blow on it, and even then, how do I tell somebody, hey, let's buy this really crazy 4080 instead of a 4090? Ultimately, no matter what your preference is for aesthetics, cooling, or whatnot, performance factors in there. A 4090 is just a faster card, and at $1,650, I guarantee you can buy a custom 4090. You could buy a 4090 that is it's not just a Founders Edition, which a Founders Edition would still be faster than this card easily in most everything, but you could buy one with a custom cooled situation for roughly the same price. I can't recommend it at all. So, you know, that's just the way it is. I don't understand, you know, I get it. Maybe there's ASUS thinks they can charge an ASUS tax, but I think this is a crazy piece of hardware. That's one of the things I like to talk about. Hardware that is like unusual and ridiculous, and I think this is one of those things. It's just not. I don't know. Again, the question is, who is this for? And this is for someone who's just such a Noctua fan that they will buy anything that's got Noctua's name on it or anything that's got ASUS's name on it, and that's what they want. Something to note about this card, it is probably the thickest cooler. I'm trying to look for the right word there. At 4.3 slots. So basically, you're going to have an ATX case. You're going to need to get you like one of these, for example, or maybe the like the one that would probably look good in would be the Fractal Design North with the wood front. It would look pretty slick in that, I think, if you did like an all Noctua build. But man, that is going to cost some money, and you're not going to get much in the way of performance for that. You may get some quiet if you're a quiet aficionado. You like your stuff to be very silent when you run it. That this may be a something that you can look at. Really, other than that, though, I can't, and I wouldn't even recommend it for that. I would say you can get plenty of quiet out of a custom cooled 4090 as well, with enough fans. So anyway, ridiculous piece of hardware. So there you go. You want to opt for a 4080 that costs as much as a 4090, then here's one you could opt for. Moving on, the 7950X3D. So I've already spoken again on the 7950X3D as well. But I've noticed some channels and some folks say that the 7950X3D is a scam. It's a total scam. And I understand where they're coming from. I get it. So here's the cons of this chip. Let's just kind of go down what I think are sort of your issues with it. Number one, it's not as fast in production activities as a regular 7950X. A regular 7950X is going to be better at typical workstation things, probably video editing, compiling. Like its Cinebench scores are going to be higher. It's, anything that is a multitasking item is not going to do as well on this chip. It's just not. And the reason is because the cores that have the 3D V-cache, okay, just using this picture here, right? So that's going to be these cores, right? These cores, just due to the cache, they do not clock as high as these cores, all right? The advertised speed for this is 5.7 gigahertz. That's occurring on these chips, not these, okay? So that's why. It's going to be better than a 7950X at gaming in a lot of situations. Maybe not every single situation, though. The 7950X might, if there was a very specific gaming scenario and you had really good RAM on the 7950X, it may be able to actually close the gap a little bit with the X3D chip. The X3D chip is going to win most of the time, though, in gaming. So really, it's kind of a gaming chip. The issue with it is, with that part, is this is a very expensive gaming chip that is going to get beaten soundly by a lower model when the 7800X3D releases that is cheaper. And the reason why it's going to lose to that chip is because there is a latency when you have 16 cores, and the interface has to go back and forth between these two cores. There will be no such problem with the 7800X 3D because it only has one, and that one has the 3D cache on it. The reason why AMD chose to go about it the way they did is it's a compromise. They chose to do this because if they didn't, they would not get the 5.7 gigahertz, and they would lose pretty heavily if both of these cores had 3D V-cache in professional workloads that don't really use this V-cache. So AMD was kind of left in a weird spot. Do we put V-cache on both of these and then lose, not really gain anything in gaming performance because, it's still going to be just a V-cached core like these, right? And gaming usually doesn't use very many cores. That's the other thing. It usually uses a couple of cores and that's it. So AMD really quickly realized that one chiplet with Vcache was all you needed for gaming, and then they could still get some decent performance in professional apps, because it's not like it's a slouch. It's just not going to be as fast in a lot of things as 7950X. The problem is, as well, you have to get operating system updates that get around this, because in order for it to operate at peak performance, it has to park the cores, right? It has to take the cores that are not the 3D Vcache and kind of park them when you go into a video game, so the video game only uses these cores. So in essence, I think the reason why people are calling this a scam is because the way it operates is a lot like a 7800 X3D. It only uses the cores, ideally for gaming, that have the extra cache. I don't know that I completely see this as a scam. What this is, I believe, is it's a compromise. It's a compromise because there just was no getting around it. You want the games to run on these cores, not these cores. You want professional apps to get the advantage of having at least some cores that clock up to the maximum speed that, whoops, as I click on this, you want some apps that can use it to get the advantage of clocking all the way up in frequency to what the max frequency of this can be. And because you want it to be successful in both areas, you've made it mediocre. That's basically what's happened. It does take less power than the 7950X. So, well, and it takes less power because obviously these cores don't clock up as high. So that's that. So I don't think it's necessarily a scam. I think that AMD probably, I don't know that there's a buyer out there for this CPU realistically. I know people have bought them. They're already sold out in places. But what's the point is my problem. It's, if you buy this, it's the most expensive CPU, you're just looking for bragging rights. Really. Like, you're just looking, because I don't think 98% of the folks that are going to build either a gaming machine or a workstation machine, I don't think this is the chip that you use for any dedicated machine. I think you use it maybe if you're a professional who games a lot and your workload is not going to massively be affected by this little drop in frequency on these cores. Maybe that's what you do. Maybe that's who buys this. Maybe someone who doesn't want to mess with eco mode but wants to get a cooler running CPU that's good for gaming. Maybe, but it's $700. It's very expensive. And I think if you're buying a dedicated gaming machine, you wait for the 7800 X3D. I think that that's just what you do. So this is, again, very kind of a weird one. It's not a bad chip. It's just, it also takes some finagling to get going. Again, the operating system has to be updated and know to park these cores to make sure that the games are on this core. Like, it's a little janky. Like, it's not completely straightforward. But that leads me to the next deal. If you haven't, feel free to go over and subscribe to Actually Hardcore Overclocking. Bullzoid is this guy's handle, and he is great. Like, he goes through all of details, things that I'm not even sure I understand about computer hardware, as far as like the actual componentry on the boards, the power circuitry, like everything. Like, he goes through a lot of stuff. It's very entertaining. It's very nice that he does that. I've been watching him for a while. He has had absolute hell trying to get 8,000 megahertz DDR5 to operate on the 13th gen Intel CPUs. And the reason why I thought this is very important to bring up, a lot of people were speculating that once you put, or at least I say a lot of people, I was speculating, let me be clear about that. that once you put really fast RAM on the 13th gen Intel CPUs, maybe it would make up some of the gap in certain titles against the V-Cache AMD chips. But apparently it does not work well. It just doesn't like it. Even 7200 megahertz DDR5 in a lot of cases is very unstable, or it can be. So that gap is not going to be made up like I thought it was with the ease I thought it might be, or at least, reduced. So what's in essence happening is AMD is on the very far edge of what they can release. This CPU is a compromise. It's got some, issues, but it is very fast in gaming in a lot of games. You have to understand what you're sacrificing here or doing if you're going to use this chip. And again, I would highly recommend to anyone who will listen, if you're going to build a dedicated gaming machine only, wait for the 7800X3D. This chip only makes sense if you happen to do also work that you could use all 16 cores, and for whatever reason you don't want to get the 7950X. Because remember, you can still game on the 7950X and it is no slouch at all. So that's kind of the use case, which I think is a very small use case, but allowed AMD to kind of top the charts, right? Well, Intel trying to top the charts, one way that they could get there is through faster memory. But now the faster memory is giving problems. This chip kind of has its problems. The memory has its problem. Intel, like, what I'm saying is there's no magic bullet, right, that gets you, okay, I'm now the top dog of all gaming that there is. And it's just like hardware manufacturers are really pushing things. I don't think 8000 megahertz DDR5, if I'm listening to Billzoid, and I haven't listened to this entire video, it's an hour long, but basically I don't think it's ready for prime time. He spent a lot of money and effort trying to make this work, and he just couldn't get it to work. And if he can't get it to work, I'm not even going to bother trying. And I don't think it's ready for prime time. I'm not convinced the V-Cache, non-V-Cache chiplets on the same chip to give you 16 cores and 32 threads, but have gaming performance on one. Like, I'm not sure that this is fully baked either, because Microsoft had to release updates to support it, and it was sort of a big deal. So, do your research. Look at what games you play. Find out if you get an advantage potentially through AMD or Intel. But realize, having said all of this, at the end of the day, remember, if you're building a gaming machine, the CPU is not the most important thing. Like, getting a good CPU is important, but getting one of these crazy expensive top-of-the-line setups that will cost an arm and a leg is not. I would, again, stress 13600K, 7800X 3D, 7700X, 13700K even, in that range of CPU is all you need, especially if you're gaming at 1440p or 4K. I would not bother with these CPUs for just a gaming rig. You can still do work on those CPUs as well, but you need to find out what it is you do that requires those CPUs, which is why I kind of I don't think this is a scam again, but I really don't think, I think the audience is pretty small. I think there's people out there buying these that probably don't need them for sure. But that's fine. Like, that's also a buy case. If you just want one, then fine, you can buy one. But then don't be upset if after being given the advice, when the 7800X3D comes out and you're like, well, these are like $350 less and they're performing just as well or even beating them in all my favorite games. Well, yeah, because you were warned about this. This is not just a gaming chip. The only way to look at this and make a case for buying it is if if you do some work with it and you need 16 cores and 32 threads. And by doing that, you're giving up the absolute top of the line gaming performance because there's a little bit more latency, and the power budget is spread between 16 cores, not 8. So that's why I think people are kind of calling it a scam, quote unquote. I don't know that it really is a scam. Physically, you do get what you pay for, but I do think this is a little bit, bottom line, is a little bit overpriced. I think that 8,000 megahertz memory is not going to save Intel after all. And yeah, 700X 3D is probably going to be where the juice is. That's basically it. Or a 13600K at Micro Center especially is an unbelievably good deal. So strong processor. That's it for my little talk today. Guys, I hope you have a really good one. If you would want to like and subscribe, that would be amazing. If not, then that's cool too. But hey, either way, please have a great day. Thank you.